Oh, it has to be
Very
up.
good.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, Rachel, you may begin.
I'm testifying in opposition to both.
Excuse me, could you please name and the organization?
My name is Rachel Foster, and I'm the co-founding co-chair of World Without Exploitation, the largest national anti-trafficking coalition in the country. World We is comprised of over 200 member organizations from across the United States, many led by survivors who exited the sex trade after years of exploitation. I'm testifying in opposition to both 2713 and 2716. My testimony will be the same. May I speak to both bills?
Sure. What was the other bill?
2716 and
Yeah.
2713. Okay. On Friday, we were alerted to the full decriminalization bills. For the last 3 days, we have been fielding calls nonstop from colleagues in New England and around the country, and from survivors who are all saying the same thing. Rhode Island has tried this, and it has failed. But it became an epicenter of brutal exploitation and caused serious harm to people over a 29-year period. Why are they doing this again? So today, I am here to speak out for the dozens of survivors we've heard from since Friday, all vehemently opposing the decriminalization of brothel keeping, pimping, and sex buying here in Rhode Island. I want to be very clear. World Without Exploitation completely supports the decriminalization of those bought and sold in prostitution. But decriminalizing the sex trade in its entirety will lead to increased demand for prostitution and result in sex trafficking of marginalized girls and women and other vulnerable individuals to meet that demand. We know this because we have seen this exact story play out right here in Rhode Island. And right now, full decriminalization has been pushed around the country, from Vermont to DC to North Carolina to Louisiana to Oregon. Well-funded, methodical efforts to legalize brothel keeping, pimping, and sex buying have been exposed. Hoodwinking has been part of the process. Bills pop up under the cover of darkness with pro-pimping supporters conveniently omitting how they seek to give free rein to pimps, sex buyers. For us, it's exhausting. For survivors, it's devastating. Over the past decade, I have interviewed hundreds of survivors of the sex trade from around the country. Predominantly women of color, virtually all were also survivors of childhood sexual abuse. They had suffered compound traumas having to do with living in poverty, dealing with parental mental illness and addiction, housing instability, educational interruption, and neglect and abuse. Though they may have come from different backgrounds and have had different life experiences, not one of them recommends decriminalizing pimping, sex buying, and brothel keeping. In other words, legalizing exploitation. And here's the reality. You will never hear the voices of the vast majority of those brutally trafficked in and out of Rhode Island, those still in the sex trade or those who have recently exited. Most are terrified, and rightfully so, to testify. Many face violence should they speak out. So I urge you to really listen to the voices of those survivors who are putting it all on the line and coming forward today. The central question before you is not, as some have conveniently portrayed, a binary one of decriminalizing prostituted people or not. What is really being debated here is whether the demand side of prostitution should be decriminalized.
Thank you. Thank you. And I might remind the audience that although there is a 3-minute time limit, if you have additional things to say, and we did receive your written testimony to continue by submitting some written testimony if you weren't able to say what you wanted to fully say in the 3 minutes. Yes, I believe Senator Archambault has a question for you.
Yeah, thank you. Really just a comment. I want to thank you for your leadership and courage on the issue and to talk about it in a way that certainly helps to educate me to understand it much more deeply, and all sorts of flags go off in my head on everything you say. So
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions by committee members? Okay, thank you. Next, Maria, Marla? Is it Marla or Maria?
Maria.
Maria.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Maria Lisa Escobar, and I'm here representing World Without Exploitation. As my colleague Rachel mentioned, we are the largest national anti-human trafficking coalition with over 200 U.S.-based organizations that work together to create a world free from human trafficking and sexual exploitation. We are guided by survivors of the commercial sex trade whose perspectives are critical in developing just and effective policy. Additionally, in 2020, I co-founded the World Without Exploitation Youth Coalition, a youth network ages 16 to 28, aiming to engage other young people in efforts to ending human trafficking and exploitation. May I please present on both bills 2713 and 2716?
Yes, you're speaking on both today.
Yes. Thank you. Both bills misrepresent their full implications. They do not just decriminalize those sold in the sex trade, which we support. They remove all legal barriers to sex buying, pimping, and brothel keeping. These bills demonstrate a fundamental misunderstanding of the realities of the sex trade and minimizes the lived experience of survivors. Why do you want a violent industry like the sex trade to expand? Prostitution and sex trafficking are inextricably linked and fueled by the demand for commercial sex. Survivors in every state will tell you one thing: violence is pervasive. Physical, emotional, sexual, and psychological abuse is the norm, not the exception in this industry. These implications should not come as a surprise, as Rhode Island already experimented with the legal sex trade when the state decriminalized prostitution from 1980 to 2009. During their 29-year experiment with full decriminalization, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children wrote to the governor of Rhode Island stating this decision, quote, deprived Rhode Island law enforcement of the ability to detect whether children were being victimized in this commercial sex trade, to rescue these child victims, and to provide them with the services they so desperately needed. As someone who works with youth every day, I'm well aware of how susceptible young people are to entering the sex trade, with a higher risk for those who are in foster care, have a history of child abuse, and those part of the LGBTQ plus community. I've witnessed how social media has become a tool for traffickers to prey on youth, posing as prospective love interests or sugar daddies, soliciting the company of minors for the exchange of money or lavish gifts. I know I have been on the receiving end of these messages as well. By decriminalizing pimping, Rhode Island youth become more vulnerable to tactics of traffickers and being manipulated with false promises of love, safety, and luxuries to later find themselves in an inescapable cycle of exploitation. Keeping Rhode Island's history in mind, we hope that you will consider the harms to children, especially children from marginalized communities, by allowing sex buying and pimping to flourish undeterred. The provisions proposed in Senate Bills 2713 and 2716 would make it nearly impossible for prosecutors to hold sex traffickers, including those who traffic children, accountable for the harms they cause. Do you want Rhode Island to once again become a regional sex tourism hub, bringing more crime, sex trafficking, and violence to your area? Instead of fully decriminalizing the sex trade, we must take a holistic approach instead. World We and our member organizations support legislation that specifically ensures that people in prostitution do not face criminal penalties, but instead are provided extra strategies and services such as safe housing and access to health care. This is known as the equality model. We also support policies that enable people in the sex trade to report violence and other crimes they have experienced to law enforcement without fear of arrest. We know that criminalizing those engaged in the sex trade, whom are victims of violence and exploitation, is harmful and does nothing to prevent trafficking and exploitation.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Any questions or comments by committee members?
Just a comment. And what I'm saying is, you've seen the time go out, and you're running out of time, and you're reading your piece. We read your written. Don't think we're dismissing you.
Mm-hmm.
We read everything that you print, believe it or not. We have it all in front. Everybody in this committee does read everything we have, so you don't have to get us every word in. I just want to let you know that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Tempe.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and Senate Judiciary Committee, for hearing my testimony today. My name is Temperance Staples, and I am the Director of Research and Development at Living in Freedom Together, located in Worcester, Massachusetts. LIFT, as we call it, is the first of its kind organization in Massachusetts. It is survivor-led and stands for the equality model. Living in Freedom Together is disgusted to learn that during Sexual Assault Awareness Month, 2 bills in the state of Rhode Island are up for proposal that would fully legalize systems of prostitution. LIFT does not support any legislation that would fully decriminalize buyers. While we do support partial decriminalization of the sex trade that would protect survivors, we can only support partial decriminalization and not full. To reduce the penalty of buyers, traffickers, and brothel owners is to reduce the value of the life of a survivor. The harm caused by sex buyers, traffickers, and brothel owners is traumatic and lifelong, and something that survivors, many of whom are my friends, will always be overcoming day by day. As an ally in this movement, I could never support the consideration or passing of Bills 2716 and 2713. Decriminalizing sex buyers has proven to increase the demand for commercial sex, only increasing the public health crisis that is prostitution. For crises like prostitution to exist, there has to be sacrifice zones. For there to be sacrifice zones, there has to be systems for disposable people. And for there to be disposable people to exist, there has to be thriving avenues for racism, misogyny, and poverty. We survivors and allies at LIFT speak directly to the Rhode Island legislature when we admonish that by supporting full decriminalization, your state will become a harbinger of these systems of exploitation. Systems of prostitution do not know state borders. While this bill is Rhode Island specific, many of those now working and residing at LIFT were trafficked across borders simply because of Rhode Island's lax prostitution laws. If demand increases, more people will be at risk, including those living at the multitude of intersection of multiple vulnerabilities. Many of those at LIFT were already abused as children sexually. There's a history of abuse for many of those who end up entering these systems. It's not consequential. Or not coincidental, I should say. Allies like myself strongly oppose this bill and ask you to listen to survivors and those most impacted by this legislation. We ask you to prioritize survivors' lives and safety, not that of buyers, exploiters, and brothel owners. This bill will legislate dehumanization of some of Rhode Island's most vulnerable members. These harmful bills being proposed suggest that those who face marginalization and who have the absence of choice in life, who are most at risk of exploitation, deserve sex work, which is a term we do not subscribe to at LIFT, to be passed because that might be the only mode of income they could ever achieve. We ask that we hope for more.
Thank you. And you're testifying also on 2713 at the same time?
Yes, I should have been clear at the beginning.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Yes, Senator Archambault.
I just want to commend you all again, just very organized, compelling, powerful testimony. We listen to a lot of stuff up here, but you go deep and you hit nerves, and I don't say things I don't mean. So when you can feel the emotions from the testimony, you're pulling this empathy out. You know, we're all human beings. You don't want to see anybody exploited. And did the sponsor, did you have any contact at all with anybody who wrote this bill before testifying up here? Were there any?
We learned about this bill. We learned about this bill just on Friday. So we've come from all over to be here because this is so important, so critical that you hear from the survivors in this room and what it took for them, and you'll hear from them, to come here with really no notice. And what we see around the country is that so many of these bills happen under sort of these bait and switch. So it might come out as a health and safety bill, but it's really a full decriminalization bill, and people don't know until it is the 11th hour. So it took a lot to come here today, but we felt it was that critical.
Thank you. God bless you all. Wish blessings on you for what you do.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your testimony. Next up, we have Alina Bluto, Nicole Bell, and Alexandra Powell. And I see that, who do we have here? Is it Alina?
Alina Bluto.
Alina and perfect. We have the Alina, Nicole, and Alexandria. I see that you're signed up also for 2713. So your testimony today, you're testifying on both bills?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Yep.
Alina, just a reminder, you have 3 minutes for your testimony. You may begin if you could state your name first.
My name is Alina Bluto. I am the co-program director with Living in Freedom Together, and I am a survivor of commercial sexual exploitation. And I'm here to testify in opposition of Senate Bills 2713 and 2716. I myself have experienced significant violence at the hands of sex buyers and pimps who would be protected under these legislations. The violence I have experienced is something I must cope with on a daily basis and will continue doing so for the rest of my life. It is haunting to know that if this legislation passes, it will allow, even encourage, these perpetrators to continue inflicting harm and abuse on vulnerable populations. I am asking that you put the rights, the safety, and the well-being of victims and potential victims ahead of their perpetrators by rejecting this bill.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any comments or questions? Oh, yes, Senator Dela Cruz.
I want to thank you for coming in and testifying. I know it's a really difficult thing to do, but your story helps a lot of people, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Nicole.
Hi, thank you to the Senate Judiciary Committee for hearing my testimony today. My name is Nicole Bell. I am the founder and CEO of Living in Freedom Together, and a survivor of prostitution and sex trafficking, some of which happened right here in Providence. LIFT is a survivor-led organization providing support and resources to prostituted people, whether they are currently being prostituted or have exited what we survivors call the life. I stand here today testifying in opposition of S2716 and S2713. It was almost comical hearing you talk about criminalizing people stealing catalytic converters earlier and reducing the violence I experienced at the hands of sex buyers to essentially a speeding ticket. These bills do nothing to provide anything for survivors like myself, but instead work to provide a haven for sex buyers, traffickers, brothel keepers, and profiteers. Reducing the act of buying access to another person's body, mostly women and girls, and mostly BIPOC and LGBTQ plus individuals, to an infraction like public intoxication diminishes the violence and harm that survivors experience at the hands of privileged sex buyers and perpetrators. The fact that you think a ticket or civil infraction is sufficient to penalize buyers makes it abundantly clear that you have never had to exchange access to your body to meet your basic needs like food and shelter. Instead of putting forth harmful bills like these, which seek to whitewash the inherent violence of the sex trade, why not listen to survivors of prostitution who are most impacted? Instead of relegating members of your constituencies to being bought and sold into a violent system of oppression, why not work on legislation to address push factors into the sex trade, like poverty, childhood sexual abuse, the broken child welfare system, racism and discrimination, to name a few? Systems of prostitution are held in place by institutional racism, misogyny, bigotry, and patriarchy. As survivors, we are asking Rhode Island legislature to vote against these bills and consider on working legislation that will protect prostituted people and hold sex buyers and traffickers accountable for the violence they perpetrate. We know that in places where there are lax prostitution laws, the demand increases. My organization serves over 500 individuals in Central Mass, ages 9 to in their 60s. Is Rhode Island prepared to take an influx of prostituted people and violent traffickers and abusive sex buyers that will flock to your cities if these bills are passed? I know that this will happen because I was once sold for sex as a teen in your indoor establishments. Never once did any of the adult men buying access to brutalize my body ask if I was old enough to be doing this, which I was not. They didn't ask because they didn't care. Neither did my trafficker. They never will. I am asking you here today to care. These bills will grow the demand for access to women and girls' bodies for sexual purposes. It is the most marginalized who will end up paying the price for these disgusting bills. It is those who will profit off the backs of your most marginalized community members who will benefit. Those with means will win again, and women and girls will be sacrificed to meet their wants. We continually talk about equality for women, but there is no pathway to gender and racial equality if we are allowed to be reduced to commodities to be bought and sold by privileged white men. Global data shows that buyers are almost exclusively white, highly educated and affluent, married men purchasing the bodies of black and brown girls. These bills provide zero support for people in prostitution or those wishing to exit. The overwhelming majority of prostituted people are living at the intersection of multiple vulnerabilities like homelessness, substance use disorder, mental health, and food insecurities. It's hard for the privileged to accept that prostitution is not the glamorous occupation that Hollywood portrays.
Thank you.
I know you have the rest of my testimony. I do urge you to reject these bills and look at legislation like the equality model, which is partial decriminalization. LIFT does support the decriminalization of those being exploited in the sex trade, not those exploiting.
Thank you. Yes, Senator Archambault.
You know, I was going to say something. Thanks again for your testimony. I'm 100% against it. I'm with you 100% on it. Put that right out there.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any other comments or questions by committee members? Okay, seeing none, Alexandria. long as it's up.
Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you to the Senate Judiciary Committee for hearing my testimony today. My name is Alexandra Powell. My pronouns are ZZR. I'm a non-binary gender fluid survivor of the sex trade and the coordinator of youth services with Living in Freedom Together. I'm testifying in opposition to both S2713 and 2716. I mean, as we mentioned, like, prostitution is sexual violence, and we agree that those being prostituted should be decriminalized, but those purchasing access to people's bodies should remain criminalized. The two proposals are both harmful in that S2716 and 2713 both repeal laws against buying sex, signaling to society that sex buying is socially acceptable, therefore increasing demand for commercial sex as sex buyers flock to the state from across the country via sex tourism. Sex trafficking exists because demand for paid sex consistently outpaces supply. Increased demand puts children and other marginalized groups at higher risk for sex trafficking. When talking about those being bought and sold or prostituted people, as we use, or survivors, there's often a myth of choice when in reality the majority of survivors are those living at the intersections of marginalizations and vulnerabilities, as we've discussed. And many survivors are forced to enter prostitution as a young age, either at the hands of traffickers or to meet very, very basic needs. From everything I have seen and learned, both in my personal experience as a survivor and a professional, in my professional experience supporting both youth and adult survivors across New England, really, I assure you that no part of this is a choice. And as a survivor peer mentor who supports youth, again, across the New England area, it's really terrifying to me that Rhode Island is considering full decriminalization, and this has been brought here today. Based on data we know about trafficking and exploitation, based on data we know about trafficking and exploitation of children and the transient nature of this violence in marginalized populations, the impact of full decriminalization in Rhode Island is likely to increase harm to marginalized communities, not only in Rhode Island, but across the greater New England area and beyond. I just want to say too, like, as an LGBT survivor, my sexual orientation and gender identity were definitely contributing factors to my entry and delayed exit. Marginalized individuals deserve access to communities and real employment, not to be pigeonholed into violence as an only means of income. Full decriminalization is often pushed under the guise that this is the only means of income for marginalized individuals. Specifically, we're talking like BIPOC trans women. Shouldn't we instead be pushing to expand opportunities for marginalized individuals and eliminate racism and transphobia, which push marginalized individuals to the fringes of community and into exploitation? Many survivors refer to losing a piece of their soul every time, a sentiment I've shared over time. Again, this is not a choice. It is a means of survival and a form of overt violence and oppression that comes in a combo deal, as I can assure you firsthand and from secondhand experience, with severe, complex, chronic traumatic stress disorder, chronic and debilitating illness from the life, and the loss of normalcy in any human interaction. Physically, many of us face complications due to substance use disorder and or homelessness, and the repeated violent sex acts take a significant toll on physical, sexual, and reproductive health. Places and people that were once considered safe are no longer, as we are further exploited. Everyone is a buyer, and if they're not, they still look like one. Medical services feel like further violation of our bodies. The list goes on. Full decriminalization dismisses the lifelong impact of this.
Thank you. Thank you. We have to end at that. Thank you. Do we have any questions for this witness? Yes, Senator Quesada.
It's not a question. I just want to take the opportunity to thank each one of you for coming and share your experience and your testimony today with us. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Well,
Senator Reptakis.
Just a comment. I just want to say, following up what Senator Quesada said, absolutely. I want to thank you for your courage in testifying. And just to let you know, the piles of letters, opposition is like 2-1, maybe 3-1. So thank you very much for coming and testifying.
Yes, thank you for coming to testify.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Natalie, Feliciano, Tricia, Grant, Robin, Lavasser. And I have all three of you on for 2713. So are you testifying on both 2716 and 2713?
Correct.
So I called Natalie, Tricia, and Robin. Okay. Just a reminder, you have 3 minutes for your testimony. Do we have Natalie here? Yes. Okay, you may begin, Natalie, with the button up. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you to the Senate Judiciary Committee for hearing my testimony. My name is Natalie Feliciano, and I would like to start off by saying that I am a child of God, a daughter, a mother, sister, cousin, aunt, friend, but most importantly, a human being that deserves respect, love, kindness, honesty, loyalty, and so much more than being sold and prostituted. I stand here today testifying in opposition of S2716 and S2713. Unfortunately, I didn't get the life I deserved. And at the age of 14, I was trafficked and being used and abused by adult men, being treated like less than a human being, being passed from men to men, at times for $20, at times for even nothing. All I wanted at the time was someone to support me or help me, but no one was there except my trafficker and buyers. And it just got worse from there. I ended up getting pregnant, developing a substance use disorder, being kidnapped and exploited even more. Thankfully, I was able to exit the life in 2018, but unfortunately being criminalized for my victimization ended me up in jail. I was jailed for the violence I experienced, not the buyers, not my traffickers, but me, who suffered their brutalization. Every time I was released from the jail, I went back to the only thing I knew, the life and drugs. But in 2021, on my own, I ran to a program called LIFT, and my life has drastically changed in the matter of 5 to 6 months. That is what I seem to notice that your bill doesn't make any provisions for. It is exit programs like LIFT. In fact, the only one who benefits from this bill is those who traffic and exploit others. You are going to turn Rhode Island to a sex tourism destination, and more people just like me are going to be harmed and violated passing this legislation. Will mean condoning the perpetrator's behavior. Prostitution is violence. I know that because I survived it. I'm asking and begging on behalf of all survivors of the sex trade that you listen to survivors and oppose Bill S2716 and S2713.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions or comments? Thank you. Thank you. Is it Tricia? Are you?
No, I'm Robin.
Robin. Oh, Tricia, you may take a seat in the middle. Robin, you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is this right?
Yes, that is correct.
First of all, I was trafficked for many years. I grew up and was raised in Rhode Island. I came from a beautiful family. We were two household middle class. This was dysfunctional, but what family isn't dysfunctional? But we had love. My father had 4 girls. Well, he wasn't my real father. My mother remarried, and he raised me as his daughter, so I didn't have that void of not having a dad there. 4 girls. My mother's Italian, very strict. So I was the oldest girl. So, of course, I think the first time I could have a boyfriend, I was 17, and I was just graduating from classical. And I have a picture I want to show you of what I wrote in my 12th grade yearbook. Happy are those who dream dreams and are ready to pay the price to make them come true. That was me in 12th grade. By the time
I don't mean to interrupt you, because I'm a classical graduate. Far be it from me from interrupting. But we have a rule. No, we're not supposed to have signs or signage.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
nobody told me.
That's okay. That's good. You weren't expected to know.
I mean, I speak in schools and places and organizations, and I bring awareness to human trafficking. I am a survivor. I used to work for Day One. We just started in Rhode Island, a new nonprofit. It's a faith-based organization called Together with Love, with some wonderful ladies over there. But anyways, getting back to the story. So it was strict at home. And I mean, if I had a boyfriend over, like, all my sisters would be gawking, and my father would be like, if I even went to the movies, like, she better come back the same way she left her, or you'll end up in a pine box. So it was really hard. So when I got to college and got a little freedom, I went to Johnson & Wales for fashion merchandising. And I worked in Riccardi's right over there in the arcade. Little did I know upstairs was a massage parlor. But anyways, I met a man there. And he came in all the time to see me. He was sweet to me. He talked to me. He brought me flowers. Took me out, paid attention to me. I didn't know at this time I was being groomed and going to be trafficked. fell in love with that man. He was the devil. You cannot pass this law. I have seen firsthand. Let me tell you, it could be if it happened to me, it could happen to your daughter, your niece, your granddaughter, your mother, your sister. And behind me, I not only was I addicted to him because I was in love with him, I became addicted to drugs. He started feeding me drugs. After I didn't, it took a long time to grow in parts. Anyways, if you love me, oh, we'll make millions. I'm going to take you away. We're going to have this wonderful life together. And I believed it. It's been 20 years 15 years since I stopped prostituting, but 20 years since I've been out of the life. I've tricked with congressmen, policemen, doctors, lawyers, went to their offices, all in Rhode Island. It's the bias that when you decriminalize this, they'll just be on a rampage. And I remember when Rhode Island had that law, and I remember pimps coming down from Boston because of my pimp, and they would rent houses here. And I remember one girl was locked in a trunk, and when she got out was almost beaten to death with a club. Bloody, I couldn't help her. They would, God forbid, I mean, I had myself a trick. A 300-pound man tried to kill me. I had to pull the gun off my head. I was more scared of going home without the right amount of money than getting my ass kicked than that man shooting me. I don't know and understand how if you want to prostitute yourself and sell yourself.
Okay. Your time has ended.
Okay.
And I know it's a very emotional topic, and I appreciate all of you taking your time to come here today to testify. And with that, does any committee members have any questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming out and testifying.
Sorry, I'm very emotional.
Next is Tricia. If you could please state your name.
Yes. Thank you for hearing my testimony today. My name is Tricia Grant. I work for Amira. I partner with WWE in Nicosia and have my own nonprofit, If Only One. I am here from Maine in opposition of 2713 and 2716. May I speak on both bills? Okay. Yes. I am a survivor of commercial sexual exploitation of children. I was trafficked in Maine and throughout New England when I was 15. I was never asked how old I was or if I wanted to be there. Nobody cared. If anything, they were happier that I was young. I looked like I was 12. As we heard in 2 other bills today, I believe that we can agree that protecting children should always be a priority. But what about the child who was abused and then exploited and then turned into an adult who knew nothing other than being exploited and believes that this is their only choice? What about the adult who can't get another job and somebody offers them an opportunity and then realizes they no longer have a choice? What about the person struggling with substance use who is offered substances in exchange for sex? In these situations, I agree with expanding eligibility for expungement. But the other 2 parts of these bills, no. So many survivors I've walked alongside spent decades in silence because of shame, of fear or judgment, not ever talking about their experiences, even if they thought they were there by choice. Most of them have never heard the terms force, fraud, or coercion, so were never truly informed. I was one of those people. It took me 16 years to even know that there was a name for what happened to me and that it wasn't my fault. My life fell apart for 1.5 years after that while I tried to figure out what that meant. Some of the things we're recovering from are CPTSD, self-worth, depression, chronic depression, abortion, STIs, substance use, lifelong physical ailments, and these are just a few. I do have many questions about the motive behind these bills and 2 big questions. I know I can't get those addressed here right now. When it's referenced in the bill 2716 about infectious venereal diseases, who exactly are they referring to? Are they referring to the person selling sex, or are they referring to the person buying sex? To the person selling sex, or the person buying sex, sorry. And what would it mean to decriminalize certain commercial sexual activity? What does that even mean? I will end with this last thought, all meaning 100% of the survivors I have met, and I'm not exaggerating, 100% of the survivors that I have met have spent their lifetime recovering from the things that I mentioned above, that were done to them by their exploiter or their buyers, and sometimes both. None of them were celebrating their experiences. I'm always willing to continue this conversation so that you can be fully informed, which is always my objective. I'm willing to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Yes, Senator Archambault.
Yeah, just thank you for coming all the way down from Maine and for expression, and all of you for your personal, tragedies, which can't be easy to voice and articulate to strangers, but you're talking from your heart and you're inspiring so many others, all of you, and this entire session, this is the most emotionally moving and compelling testimony that I've heard, and I'm sure my colleagues would agree. We hear a lot of stuff up here on diverse issues, but wow, your stuff really hits the heart and brings that full empathy out. God bless you all.
Thank you for hearing us.
Thank you for having us.
1 second, has any other committee members have any comments? All set? Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Sen Reinhold, Cindy Zelker, and Randall Rose. Okay, is it Sen Reinhold, Cindy Zelker, and Randall Rose? Okay, just a reminder, you have 3 minutes for your testimony. We'll begin with both Susan and Cindy. You're signed up on 2716 and 2713. Are you going to testify on both? Okay. Susan, you may proceed with your testimony.
And
make sure the button is up.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Actually, I wish I had signed up as Jane Doe, because that, in talking with my daughter, that is what she preferred, and for her safety and for mine. And so you have what I've submitted. I'm just going to kind of go off script and let you know that I'm testifying as a parent, a foster parent, an adoptive parent, and just someone who has been living and seeing what systems have done to children, especially those in foster care. I've been a foster parent for over 18 years. I was a teacher for 20 years. And when our daughter, and I'm going to refer to her as Annie, came into our lives, she had already been through several homes. She had already been sexually assaulted. And at the age of 6, came with a lot of baggage. We worked with her intensively, and she ended up, by the time she hit her teen years, running away often. And so the system that was in place, in order to keep her safe, put her into group homes. And it was in these very group homes that, between workers and other girls that were there, she learned about the life. Was introduced to a lot of the things that are on social media, introduced to how to be able to get into the work once she got out and didn't want to come back to us. There was a long stretch of time where she wanted nothing to do with us as her adoptive family. She wanted to pursue what she envisioned as her identity based on what she had been told. She knew nothing of her birth family, but at that time, the system, DCYF, said, oh no, kids who are being adopted need to know about their birth families. And so she was introduced to a real problematic can of worms. So she sought them out. She learned from her mother some of the trade. She learned from other friends, and even had one friend who taught her oral sex, and had someone come over to be part of a demonstration, and then he raped her at age 15. She's had a tough life, And there have been times where, now that she's reconnected with me, she is Ubered to my house, beaten up after a play. She continues to be in the life. She loves the person who she refers to as her manager, who is coincidentally in prison, but she still sends money to. And that there are others on the outside who still manage her, who still pimp her. It's all interconnected. And she will not give me names to protect me. She has distanced where she lives to protect me. She is about an hour away from where I live, but yet has the courage and the bravery to come home when she really needs a soft place to land. So anyway, the other day, as I sat and contemplated what I was going to say, you have it here.
Yes.
One last thing.
Your time is up.
Okay. Are you going to help restrain the floodgates from opening?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Yes, Senator Archambault.
Well, God bless you, because you gave her the unconditional love to come home, right? She knows when she comes to you, she's getting that
Absolutely.
unconditional love.
And there's a piece of artwork in here that's very telling, which I couldn't show you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments by committee members? Cindy. Is it Cindy Zelker? Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you. Am I on? Yes. Okay, thank you. Dear Chairwoman Coyne and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, my name is Cindy Zelker and I live in Barrington, District 32. And yes, I was just diagnosed with Parkinson's. I am part of a nonprofit volunteer organization called Together with Love. Our mission is to advocate and care for the prostituted and sex-trafficked people of Rhode Island. Based on Together with Love's work with victims and survivors of sex trafficking, I have seen that prostitution and sex trafficking are closely connected. Prostitution routinely includes violence against women. People in prostitution are assaulted and exploited by their buyers and pimps daily. Their lives are not their own. Often their identification papers are taken from them. They don't receive adequate or any health care. And when they attempt to exercise some form of control over their own lives, they are beaten, threatened, and abused. This is a reality in Rhode Island, too. Decriminalization of prostitution will only add to their suffering. What these men and women need are services to help them exit the life they were manipulated into. Without any prohibitions, violence will increase, prosecution of traffickers will become scarce, and there won't even be probable cause to investigate human trafficking cases. Without these deterrents, violence against women and men will increase. Because of these reasons and many others, I oppose S2713 and S2716.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from committee members? Seeing none at this time, thank you very much for your testimony.